when you step back and look at the FIT Act, I mean, I think the challenge has always been the lobbying of the fitness industry, which is we have a team and they're working hard, but if you compare that to the army of big pharma, right? And so we're always at opposition of the health and wellness and reactive versus proactive, and how can we take a different approach? That's always been the big challenge, and I actually think one of the things that may happen, as much as everyone has different opinions on the controversy of the GLP-1 drugs, as they continue to kind of tweak and morph and different groups are understanding this medication, it's again the long-lasting or all the impacts that drug can have on a whole scope of different things. And so out of circumstance more than anything else, there could become some alignment in terms of what big pharma wants is also what the fitness industry
Pharma's
wants.
going to make their money while people get fit versus being unfit.
Correct.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Chrissy Van. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. On today's episode, we welcome Chris Smith, Chairman of the Health and Fitness Association and CEO of Fitness World Canada. Chris is fresh off the heels of the Health and Fitness Association's European Congress. So on today's episode, we're going to hear some of his takeaways from the event, learn about some of the operators' challenges and successes in 2024, and chat trends heading into 2025. Before we get to it, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. I'm your host, Chrissy Van, and this is ATFW.
So we have Chris Smith joining us, fresh off the heels of the European Congress. And before we dive into what you experienced there, I'm curious, you took over as chairman of the Health and Fitness Association, formerly known as IHRSA, in July. So what has the experience been like for you so far, and what has been the focus over the last couple of months?
You know, I was serving as vice chair previous to that, so nothing necessarily surprising or new. I think just more of, you know, being in that seat, kind of, you know, trying to really support Liz and the staff in terms of, you know, the whole growth, promotion, protection, and all the things from a research, education, and advocacy perspective. None of that's really changed. I think what we're trying to really do is make sure that we're getting the wins for the industry that they want. I think in today's evolving times and the speed of the world where, you know, often we look at or think about, you know, especially in that world in terms of nonprofit, it's very, say, traditional where you're looking at a 3-year and a 5-year plan. And I just don't know that that's, you know, realistic. And I don't know that necessarily resonates with our members either, right? So it's more about, what do the next 6 quarters look like, right? How are we going to really move the association / the industry forward and, you know, go from this to this and be accountable and measurable kind of across all those things that I described. So it's been good.
Good.
A lot, but it's been good.
Yeah, it's not like you're busy at all. So why not add this to the agenda?
That's what I said. Yeah, I figured, hey, what's one more thing? But I mean, I got involved with the, you know, association a long time ago, but certainly wanted to serve on the board in just in terms of a way to give back. So the industry has always been very kind to me, and I look at the career that I've had and the success that I've had, and certainly, you know, as much as I could maybe be narcissistic or psychopathic and say that's because of me, certainly I put in a lot of hard work and effort, but there's a whole bunch of people that helped me along the way. And so I'm just looking at it as like, it's already been paid forward. It's time for me to pay it back. And so that's what I'm doing, you know, to the best of my abilities.
And obviously members want to stay informed over what the wins are as things progress. And over the last couple of months, click to cancel was a big one. But there were still talks of it being really impactful with the decision that was made to small businesses. So tell me a little bit about the win that the HFA had in regards to click to cancel.
Well, I think, you know, the first one is that we had a seat at the table in the discussion with the FTC, right? So it's one thing if they just kind of pass down a ruling and you're not involved at all versus we had people with a seat at the table that were very instrumental in what we did get. And so while it's not the win I think that necessarily the industry was hoping for, it's certainly much better than it could have been. And I still think there's an opportunity for us to continue to kind of challenge that process in terms of like how our industry operates versus some of the others and some of the bad actors that are out there and, you know, in some spaces, not within the fitness space. But yeah, but I think at the end of the day, it's definitely a win. And I think that's one of the things that HFA needs to do is continue to celebrate those wins. But, you know, I think with, again, our members are all in, you know, growth businesses themselves or looking to grow their businesses, entrepreneurial, whether they're at 1 club, 5 clubs, or several hundred or thousands, even at this stage. You know, the business is always more, better, faster, those types of things. And as an association, I think it's important that we also have that mindset. Yes, take credit for the wins we're getting, but we have to always kind of be striving for more because that's frankly how our members think about their own businesses, and that's how they're hardwired to think about what they expect from their association.
Well, I know obviously the focus isn't just on business in North America. It's the Health and Fitness Association that encompasses the industry from a global perspective. And yes, we gather every year at IRSA. Now, obviously, HFA, it's going to be in Las Vegas next March. But as we teed up the conversation, you're just off the heels of the European Congress. So for those that may be less familiar, first of all, what is the European Congress? What is the HFA doing there?
Yeah, I think, if you got to kind of step back and reflect backwards and go forwards. It's an event that's been going on for a long, long time. I can't remember the exact number of years now. I want to say 20 years or so, give or take. And it's something that was, tremendously successful for a long time across Europe. And so there's a European Council where there's individuals from each country that essentially represent all of the, the countries in Europe and the operators that are within that segment. And then they really kind of come together once a year to have this event, which is, somewhere around, I think this year there was just over 500 attendees. I think in some years pre-pandemic, there was as much as 600. And we're talking about over 1,000 people next year is what we're actually expecting to show up at the event next year, which will be incredible. In Amsterdam, I believe, is next year's event. So it's just an opportunity for, C-level operators and everything in between to get together and just discuss business and trends. And so a little bit different than what I think what you get at an HFA show, and much more around, I think, networking and collaborating and kind of just talking about what's working and what's not working across all different sectors and facets of the business. So some is sales and marketing, some of it's around fitness and programming, some of it's around AI and how people are deploying AI in their business. So you got the whole gamut of kind of what's going on, but a really interesting, unique event that again represents all these different sociographics, demographics, even psychographics across Europe. So give you some additional context. So in the Baltic, right? In the Baltic countries, they'll even share the stats where it's 6 to 7% fitness participation. And then you look at certain other places in Europe that are, say, at 15%. And then you look at places, say, in North America, they're at 25%. And so often I think there's still this conversation of how do we catch up to the 25? And for me, whereas I know where the U.S. was 20 years ago at 15, to say then get to the 25 that they're at now in many states, and look at that to say, well, yeah, but that took 20 years. But I think the globalization, and again, back to AI and the speed of technology and the speed of information, this time that we live in now, I think they're going to make that leap from 6, 7 to 25 in 5 to 7, maybe 10 years versus it's not going to take them 20, right? And so and then again, some of that's the whole mental health and all the other reasons that we know people are moving now. But it is very interesting, right? And there's a lot of interesting concepts and ideas from how people are operating clubs and how they're doing it.
Yeah, well, and I just think from a consumer perspective, I can't remember the name of the author now, but she wrote Fit Nation and took us through, when I was at the Fitness Technology Summit, all about the history of exercise and how it was perceived from a society. And let's face it, bodybuilders back in the day that weren't even huge were considered freaks as part of a freak show. And so the narrative has changed from the consumer side as well, where yes, it's social health, it's mental health, and the industry now is getting behind that message. But you did mention these are executive levels that have gathered and collaborating, and information and knowledge is power, and also seeing and learning from some of the differences of what might be happening in the European markets versus North American. So when you talk about what's working well, what were kind of those high level sentiments of what is working well in the industry right now there that perhaps could be a takeaway for operators across the pond?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of brands that definitely, I think, just from an AI perspective, are already incorporating some of the AI into their business. So when you talk about member journey and customer journey and all that, regardless of what brings people into the facility, how do you make sure to maximize their experience within, obviously, whatever your brand and your business model is. So there was a couple, businesses over there that are certainly enterprise level at scale, doing some really cool things, leveraging AI, and how they're using their tech stack. There's models in Europe that are staffless, that have literally no staff in them, that are still world-class facilities, very clean, very bright, great equipment and those types of things, doing some really amazing things there. There's some operators doing some stuff that, I think we hear about buzzword-wise in North America, both in the U.S. and then I would say Canada, where you hear about people wanting to do medical fitness stuff, right? And some people are there and some have cracked the code, but generally, what we tend to hear about is it's very dominated by these high-end, bigger clubs that are really kind of doing those types of things. Whereas I would say over in Europe, there are some HVLP 2.0 type operators that have, cracked the code, where they're doing some incredible work with hospitals cardiac rehab programs where the country, the health ministers have partnered with them to be the official cardiac rehab for the nation. Right. And they're in, so just a different total segment in which, again, as part of, I think, how we're trying to even look at the industry right now is to kind of put it into different segments a little bit. Because again, the value proposition is different for everyone. And then again, it varies globally as well, right, in terms of what's out there. But yeah, there's I had a lot of really good, great insights, made a lot of new relationships, if you will, met some really cool people doing some really cool things.
Well, before we get to the challenges, I'm just curious because you do operate Fitness World here in Canada, which is HVLP. So when you toured the staffless gyms, because we know here labor shortages and labor costs as well, we've had rising minimum wage, are impacts on your bottom line. When you see these models, where do your wheels turn in regards to how some of that tech might be applied to your business?
It's not that I have to or I want to figure it out, but it's one of those things where it definitely makes you curious, right? And so you never know, in terms of where we're going or the speed of it. I mean, there's definitely clubs, not just in Europe, and there's much more overseas than here. So I think when we think about staffless here, we tend to think about other brands that are, I think, a little bit smaller niche, but these are still 15,000, 25,000 square foot facilities. They're over there, they're going to talk in square meters. So I'm translating for my own understanding more than anybody else's. So it's just definitely different, but I mean, it's definitely something I'm going to explore for sure. Because there's just a huge cost benefit, right? I mean, labor's your single biggest controllable expense as a club operator outside of obviously your rent. If you're going that route, and even if you own the real estate, labor is still going to be one of your largest expenses that you have in the business. So to say it's not worth looking at, right, would be naive. And so but it is interesting.
Yeah, you've got that. Add some Roomba vacuums and a Roomba mop and change the world.
You could have a robot delivering smoothies on the workout floor.
Yeah, but I do know we just did the fitness forecast with Chris Crater, Cal Rye, and Mark Mastrove. And in that conversation, the staffless gym model came up as well. And that you can kind of argue both sides, because I do feel especially the Gen Zs that are coming into the space, or obviously our elder population, socialization is the name of the game. So how much value do you tie to the person that's regularly greeting you at front desk? Well, it could have a huge impact to your bottom line. So there's lots to be considered, but the curiosity is key. And obviously there's examples in the market where it is working if it's necessary. Challenges, though. I know, for example, electricity costs were insane in Europe. Obviously, it's an impact in other destinations, but it was a huge problem for them. So what were kind of the overarching challenges that the industry faced in 2024 and the sentiments that you were hearing?
Yeah, they weren't really. I mean, I know that's been a challenge. I think that's one of those things that, not to say they've largely come to accept as much as it's just, unfortunately, the norm, right? And so, it's less about that. I think it's more around how they continue to grow. It does seem like franchising, while, I think we tend to think about that in North America, and there's a number of really successful franchise groups that are driving a lot of, the growth here in North America. It's largely the same, European. So you don't have a lot of those small, medium scale businesses. There are some, but it seems like it's even more dominated by franchise than even, say, in North America. So I found that to be a little bit interesting as well. And I think a lot of that also has to do with just laws and regulation, whatever. So challenges, I think, maybe depends on your perspective, right? So, I mean, if you're the franchisor, it's how do I find new qualified franchisees that really can come on board and be on brand and do all the things I want to do. And if you're not a franchisee and you're just trying to really grow your business, you're competing against a lot of franchise businesses that, again, are at scale and can move and adapt quickly. And so just a bit of a different, game that I think they're playing.
Yeah, well, and from conversations that I've had too, it just seems like there's so much more available capital for those other models versus the mom and pop companies that are trying to grow in the current economic climate. And I imagine there would be similarities there.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get to a certain scale before you're ever going to attract any kind of private equity, dollars. Whereas, again, those franchise businesses are certainly attracting a lot of those dollars, globally, right? I mean, that's always the case.
This was your first time going to European Congress?
It was, yeah.
What surprised you most out of the experience? Because I'm sure you had expectations going in.
Well, this is a funny surprise. There was actually, I think, a delegation of 22 people from China that had made the way over. And so I think, again, just back to
very cool
how everything's transpired over the last several years and their abilities or inability to travel and get out. So they brought a big contingency to the European Congress, which was fun. And so I got to have some great conversations with those folks. But yeah, I think I'm looking at trying to set up a trip over there now to spend some time with them at China Fit in the next year or so, just in terms of what they're doing and how they're growing their country.
Well, and speaking from this global perspective, we talk about it all the time. I mean, All Things Fitness and Wellness has been on Capitol Hill several times to cover the PHIT Act and everything that we're trying to accomplish there. Obviously, in Europe, there's organizations as well. You were saying there's a little bit more collaboration, it sounds, from the government side, but what support are they being offered? Is the fitness industry being offered from the government perspective in regards to policies that will help get more people active and get people moving?
Yeah, I mean, it varies country to country. So in some of the, European countries, they essentially already have what is more or less is the FIT Act, right? They already have it in place. Those are more than likely the European countries also where you see the highest levels of participation. So you could argue, again, from a health perspective or benefit that, that's a great thing. I mean, I think, when you step back and look at the FIT Act, I mean, I think the challenge has always been is, it's the lobbying of the fitness industry, which is, we have a team. And they're working hard, but if you compare that to the army of big pharma, right? And so we're always at opposition of the health and wellness and reactive versus proactive, and how can we take a different approach? So that's always been the big challenge. And I actually think one of the things that may happen, potentially, I'm crossing my fingers, is that as much as everyone has different opinions on the controversy of the GLP-1 drugs, as they continue to kind of tweak and morph and different groups are understanding this medication, it's, again, the long-lasting or all the impacts that drug can have on a whole scope of different things. And so out of circumstance more than anything else, there could become some alignment in terms of what big pharma wants is also what the fitness industry
Pharma's
wants.
going to make their money while people get fit versus being unfit.
Correct. Right. So they're going to be encouraged to actually make people healthier, and that's how they're going to make their bottom lines healthy. So that could be, massive when we start to think about that. So I'm interested to see how that plays out, because there's a lot of credible research that's coming through. And again, I'm of the opinion that it's for some folks, for sure, right? Like, yes, exercising, yes, lifting weights, yes, eating healthy, and then potentially if there's something else that you need to help you get over the hump for whatever reasons, and it's going to, play span, lifespan, longevity, movement, whatever you want to call it, help you really live a better quality of life and be happier, then by all means, right, to each their own.
Yeah, it's obviously a space that we've watched tremendously. And to your point earlier, we've seen the Lifetimes, the Equinoxes get involved, and then other players kind of structure programming around it to support people with the lifestyle shift. There is a lot of opportunity there. And yeah, it's making people tons of money. So it's kind of nice that pharma is a little bit on the fitness side.
Yeah.
But
it is very North American, though.
Yeah, I was just going to say the
So
adoption's
like
slow.
The Europeans are talking about it,
Yeah.
but it's not anything over there like what it is.
It's not surprising. Obviously, I'm Canadian. I cross the border. I turn on a TV in a hotel, and 6 out of the 7 advertisements are for, are you feeling lonely? It's like somebody gracing in themselves in a field and skipping, and you're like, maybe I want to do that. Let's get some drugs. I don't know. Obviously, they find the advertisements effective, and you see them everywhere. But I think at the very least, people often copy what happens in the United States. So if they're talking about it there, and we do have large players like Lifetime and Equinox making a blueprint that works, then maybe we'll see the domino effect move faster. We've had the conversation before. It's a little unfortunate that that's what it takes to get people moving. But at the end of the day, we have a physical inactivity crisis, so we need solutions.
Yeah, it's either the real or unreal. Also, I think just celebrity endorsement, right? I mean, I don't think it's a shock to look around and go, well, they're definitely doing something and they're doing something.
Oprah was on the cover of People, and she was the Weight Watchers queen.
Yeah, not anymore, but she's moved on. But yeah, as you look at like all of, just that, I think that, again, just back to its social influence, right, globally, and these people that listen to music or watch these shows and movies or whatever, or podcasters or whoever it is, right, influencers, you name it, this huge population of people that are all doing it, like its influence over time, right, will be significant. So yeah, again, the industry needs to meet the moment, right, and be there with solutions to help people maintain, right, that lifestyle, after, right, and or make sure there's not, limit muscle wasting to the least amount possible, because that lean body mass is everyone's best friend. That's the thing I think a lot of people that are on these drugs don't understand. And it's, that's an important thing, I think, to make sure they do understand. So anyone that's ever asked me, hey, do you think? I say, hey, by all means, if that's what you want to do, go do it. But make sure you're doing resistance training 6 weeks really solid before you even start, and then do not stop. Like, really important.
Yeah. Well, and people do miss the mark because they looked, let's face it, at the end of the day, yes, it helps with the obesity crisis, but there are the people that are like, I want to lose 20 pounds for the wedding. I want to lose it for this. They're not considering that. They just want the path of least resistance, pay for the easy. People have wanted the magic pill forever. Pill. Yeah, exactly. But
the magic pill is a magic shot too.
Yeah.
And then people find, what, it's a shot? It's not a pill yet?
That you administer yourself. Fun.
They're working on a pill, but right now it's a shot. So people are like, whoa. It's like, yeah, no, you're going to jab yourself.
Yeah. What a world. Well, we kind of stumbled into trends and obviously timing off the heels of European Congress. We're heading into 2025. We know that GLP-1 obviously is a conversation we've had exponentially. Pilates is another one at the last few conferences. All anyone is talking about. What do you feel in 2025 are going to be the things on this podcast with almost every executive that we won't be able to shut up about?
I think some of those trends for sure, but I think it'll be, who is leveraging AI in a meaningful way. So I think everyone's going to touch AI or play with AI in some form or fashion. It's going to be who's using it well. And so stuff as simple as those that embrace Copilot on the Microsoft Office suite and that they're using that to just synergize their own just day-to-day operations within their own executive management teams. Those that are effectively using, again, Microsoft product of Teams, or whether they're using the Zoom stuff or whatever platform you're using, but are you going to take that layer of the AI and put it on top of it to just speed up your effectiveness and efficiency? And so, and again, there's things you can do from a recruiting perspective and a hiring perspective and learning and development in terms of, retaining staff. So the businesses that really, I think, can figure that out are going to continue. That'll be what the story's about. It's not going to say they're going to have a massive competitive advantage in 1 year, but I think we're just in this very interesting experimentation phase where everyone's kind of playing with and touching all these different tools. And then I think a year from now, that's what we'll be talking about, where people are going to say, now here's what's working. Because I think there's going to be a lot of experimentation with a lot of different platforms, which, will be provocative in the sense of conversation in terms of, oh, we tried that, we didn't like it, here's why. Or we tried this one and it was amazing and here's why, right? And then I think we'll start to see people gravitating to certain platforms, more so than others a year from now, specifically within the space.
Yeah, the power of it is wild. Even in the podcast space, when I was at FIT Tech, there was one of the keynotes that talked about the fact that they basically used a podcast generator and prompted it. And there was a whole well-educated hosted podcast with no hosts, which is a little terrifying if you think about it. But at the end of the day, I think it's just parallels within the fitness industry where personalization is still so key. And that's the part of business that can't be lost. But as you're looking to implement it within your own businesses in Canada, what type of resistance or adoption do you get from your executive team? Because at the end of the day, you're excited about this technology, but you basically have to re-educate an entire team in order to utilize these tools and get them excited about it at the same time without feeling threatened by it, because a huge narrative for a lot of people is this going to take my job?
Yeah, I don't think we're at that stage yet of it's going to take people's jobs. I mean, in some instances, yes, but certainly not within the health and fitness space, not yet. I think it's more of just people, they don't know until they know. So until they see it, and then once they see it, they're like, oh my goodness, wow, this is cool. And it's like, yeah, it's been cool. It's been cool for a while.
They're like, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on board the train. Like, get on the train and like the train's leaving the tracks. So yeah, there's, I wouldn't necessarily say resistance as much as, I think people are just afraid of what they don't know. I mean, I look at back like when cell phones first came out or certain things with the computer and trying to teach my parents how to use them, right?
I'm still working on that.
Even, I'm old enough where it was my grandparents and I was teaching them like how to use their computers and they were like freaked out about the technology. I feel like there's a lot of 30-something, 40-something year olds right now that are afraid of like this stuff because they just don't understand it. And there's not really a lot to understand other than I would just be curious. If you're curious, it basically teaches you how to use it, right? If you're not curious at all, which means you're not touching it, you're not using it, then, well, you're probably not going to learn it or figure it out. So you just got to be curious. I was also going to say back to like when you're talking about some of these trends, so I'll take it to another place. So in Canada, like I plan next year in 2025, I'm going to open a staffless Pilates studio.
Right on. Yay, we're getting the inside scoop.
So there you go. So back to like connecting
in Vancouver?
The dots. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have a plan for that. So that's something that I think is, just back to like where are we going and where are some of these trends going and how are some of these things evolving? and where can they all kind of come together, right? So Pilates is booming. Well, can I do something there? Oh, there's a way to do like a staffless facility using AI and technology with the appropriate tech stack. Well, can I marry those two together? I think I can.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, are you going to put it under your umbrella, or is this going to be a different standalone venture for you? Or is this top secret information that you should probably tell me?
Everything's always under the umbrella.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, usually, right? I mean, that's just the way that I operate. I've got great partners. And so always makes sense for me to keep everything under the umbrella.
Well, future gym tour in the making, which who the heck am I going to interview if there's no staff?
Well, there more to come.
Excellent. Okay.
We can do a whole separate segment / show
which we will
on that in the future.
Oh, we should document the
right
whole
now.
build, actually, now that I think about it.
We could, just not today.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, today, obviously, the focus was getting you on the heels of European Congress, and we've kind of covered this transition into 2025 and the trends. And we also covered the fact that you have stepped into this new role with the HFA, and we had the big rebranding last year at IRSA. So as you head into 2025, from the HFA perspective, what will be the focus? Where are you really harnessing your energies? Because to your point earlier, the PHIT Act, nothing new. There's been several Capitol Hill fly-ins. Yes, these conversations are great to maintain, but there's a lot more that's worked on within the organization. So what's the value to your members that you're really looking to bring in 2025?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, number one is the PHIT Act, does have a chance. It always has a chance. So there's new tax legislation that's going to have to go into effect next year, regardless of who wins the White House here in the next few days, and that with that election cycle and all the stuff that's going to go on there. So regardless of that, there's going to be an opportunity for FIT to be talked about and discussed. So, now is definitely a time to keep pressing forward for anyone and everyone domestically in the U.S. that has a relationship with a governor, a senator, any state legislatures, or anyone that has, relationships within Congress or the Senate, because early next year, there's going to be an opportunity. There's going to be a window and a sliver of time that's open, and that's going to be the time to get after it. Hopefully, regardless of the administration, they understand, again, back to all the benefits and everything else, that they can get on side with it. If you step back from that, I think, again, back to kind of this 6 quarters that I was talking about, and this whole concept of we're going to move it from, to, and whatever. Liz is working on starting her own podcast, speaking of podcasts. So I think there's some additional communication tools that are going to go out. And the importance of that is, I think the other big, maybe fundamental change is we're starting to look at the association a little bit more through segments. And so if we segment it a little bit and just think about, because the value proposition to different operators, it's not the same for every operator. And so again, if I'm a massively large operator with my own annual convention and all these things, I'm not going to the trade show to get the education or whatever else. I'm going there to, collaborate and be collegial and those types of things with, different folks and network potentially. And there might be a few, key strategic meetings with certain vendors or partners, but they're not really going there to quote unquote learn. Whereas there's a ton of our constituents that's exactly what they go for, right? They're there for the education. They're there to meet people and look at different types of equipment and try it out and, touch it and feel it and all these things. And so the segments of how we're kind of breaking out the industry, including suppliers and partners and anyone and everything in between, right? We're talking about the boutiques and the mid-tier clubs and the high-end lifestyle clubs. We're just trying to really kind of take a more constructive look at how can we build the best possible value proposition within all these tiers and pillars that I went through in the very beginning, and at the same time looking at more myopically, specifically for within these different segments.
Yeah, that makes good sense, because at the end of the day, you want to collaborate on the goal, but because they are operating really different types of businesses, you can't speak to everyone under one umbrella. So I'm sure it's probably appreciated by members as well to have that considered so that they can have the best experience possible. To round it out, because again, New Year is approaching, and I do have a quote from you for sure from earlier this year where you were like, it's all about the booty. So with you just mentioning the trade show, we saw Olympic platforms explode. I know you changed in your clubs to put tons of them in place because that's what your members wanted. What do you feel members are going to be demanding out of your spaces next year?
What are they going to be demanding?
Just threw this one at you to round this out because I'm 2025 is approaching.
I'm going to have to edit out the long pause here. Something to think about it.
Put some elevator music.
I think it's actually, it varies on a per location basis, but when I talk to members, it is more strength equipment, but now it's specific strength equipment. So the conversation is they'll say, hey, let me show you a picture of this, standing plate-loaded hamstring curl. Hey, take a look at this like thing to train like my shin muscle. And I'm like, that's your tibialis anterior. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, that's the name of the muscle. And they're like, what? And I say, yeah, your shin muscle. So yeah, anyway. So there's like people I think want more strength equipment still, but now it's almost like specialized strength equipment, or they saw it at one-off gym or whatever. And it's not to say it's bad equipment. I'm not saying that at all. It's a matter of, again, depends on your business model. Does it fit your business model? And so for me, a lot of times I say to them, well, what piece of equipment I should take out? And 9 times out of 10, they point at something that somebody's sitting on.
Right.
I'm like, there's someone using it right now.
You're like, are you going to go kick them off?
But that thing like never gets used. This is like random. I'm like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't look very random to me. But I mean, here nor there, I just think, yeah, there's continuation of just people training and, which is great news, right? So back to like, what are the benefits of lifting weights, right? And in terms of like, back to segments, like what demographics, what sociographic, like who's that good for? It's good for everybody. Right? Like we need more people doing more of it. So the fact that that's what people are asking me for all the time, I think is phenomenal. They're not asking me for more cardio equipment, right? They're not asking me to go get the latest, greatest treadmill or whatever. It's, can you get us more strength equipment? Can you get us specialized strength training equipment? Which means people are lifting and training, which is great.
Brilliant. Well, Chris Smith, it's always wonderful to pick your brain. And thank you for bringing us up to speed on all that took place at the European Congress.
All right. Thank you, Chris.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Chrissy Van. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.